Hello and welcome back to another Rush Duel Links deck profile. Today we're taking a look at Insects, or more specifically a Gyakutenno Force build which makes use of the boss monster Gyakutenno Megami. So this is a pretty interesting deck. Basically, we just got a bunch of new insects added into the game via a few different sources. We've got some from the card trader. We've had Gokibot available for one of the special packs for a little while. So we thought we'd try and build something around that. Now, insects already have two of their own boss monsters, those being Ant Rebellion of the Rebellion, which is kind of a gimmicky OTK tool that can boost up its attack, but then goes into the following turn with a bunch of 100 attack monsters. And then there's Ungrad Digra, which is, again, fine, but this kind of goes all in on an insect strategy. So the reason we've decided to go with Gyakutenno is because we have the ability to change our opponent's monsters into insects, which would then allow us to use Megami's effect to destroy our opponent's monsters. So this is not our original creation. I'm not sure who the originator of this build was, but popular member of the Rush Duel community, Ray, did take this to a tournament and actually have a top 8 finish. So very, very well done to them. And this is almost an exact replica of their list. There are a few different changes here and there, but we'll go through that in a little bit. First things first, let's talk about the skill. So Gyakutenno Force can be activated during a turn that you've normal summoned a light attribute fairy type monster with 2000 defense. So that would be both our Gyakutenno and our Gyakutenno. We can make one face-up monster on your opponent's field lose 500 attack and defense until the end of this turn. Okay, so that effect is fine. It will let us beat over some things. It's not super special, but it's useful. Then, if we have Gyakutenno Megami face up on our field, we can shuffle one card from our hand into the deck once per duel to add Gyakutenno Megami from our deck to our hand. So if we summon out the little one, we can trade one of the cards in our hand for a big one, tribute over it ideally. The big one does need the little one to be in the graveyard in order to use its effect, so it kind of all works together. So the skill isn't anything super special, but it does let Gyakutenno attack over 2800, which is a relevant number in the current meta. If we think Metarian fusion monsters, and if we think Candy Live, there's quite a lot of 2800s running around in the current meta, so being able to deal with them and attack over them using this is actually pretty good. So I guess we'll talk about this card first, since it is kind of what the deck is built around. So if we have Gyakutenno Megami in the graveyard, we can draw one card and send the top card of a deck to the graveyard. So that in itself is already pretty good. So the requirement having to have a specific card in the graveyard is a little bit annoying, but a free draw is really good, and putting a card in the graveyard is also generally really, really good. If a monster was sent to the graveyard by this effect, we can also destroy 2 face-up monsters. So notably, this has to be exactly 2. So if your opponent only has 1 monster, we can't destroy them. So in a similar way to Build Dream, which is the Worm Fusion monster, if your opponent has a maximum or just a single monster, we cannot destroy it with this effect. But the catch is that the opponent's monsters have to have the same type as the monster that we milled. So the general strategy of the deck is that we use cards like Fibron and Mechmantis to change our opponent's monsters into insects, then just kind of hope that we mill an insect off the top, and then destroy 2 of our opponent's monsters, which can be really, really strong. The other boss monster we're playing is Ancient Gear Golem, and that's because our skill does not restrict us in deck building, and this is probably the best individual card in the game. Ancient Gear Golem is actually just incredible, piercing, 3000 attack, 3000 defense, and turns off your opponent's battle traps. Everything you would want in a boss monster, Ancient Gear Golem, if you can run it in your deck, should be in there 100%. Then we'll talk about our first insect monster, and this is our first kind of converter that changes our opponents into insects. So this is Swapling Silkworm Fibron, only 100 attack, which is not the best, but 1000 defense is respectable. If we have a face-up insect-type monster on your field other than this card, we can send the top 2 cards of a deck to the graveyard. One face-up monster on the opponent's field becomes insect this turn. So this comes up in quite a few different ways. We'll talk about it when we actually get to the spell cards themselves, but the primary reason we're going to do this is for Gyakutenno's effect. Then we have Biomech Mantis, so we can shuffle 1 insect-type monster from your graveyard into the deck, so already some quite nice recycling. 1 face-up monster on your opponent's field loses 300 attack, so that is already, again, very relevant. We can make our opponent's monsters weaker, and then even if we don't do anything with the fact we've turned them into an insect, we can just attack over them, and then until the end of the turn, that monster becomes an insect. So again, one of our converters. Then we have the Dramoth Caterpillar. This is just a discard, draw a card filtering card. Again, it's decent, and ideally we want as many insects as possible in the deck so we have higher chance to get our Gyakutenno's effect off. Then we have the small Gyakutenno Megami. This card is a little bit awkward. This is kind of the brick of the deck, but our boss monster doesn't work without having a copy of this in the graveyard, so we have decided to max out on it, because it is very important that this card gets into the graveyard as soon as possible, and there have been a few games where we've just been unable to get that into the graveyard, and our deck hasn't really worked. So it kind of sucks, because having to play this card and at 3 copies because it's not searchable means we are playing 7 boss monsters, which is very bricky. Then we have Gokibor. We only actually have 2 copies of this card because it's from a special pack, which is a little bit annoying, but its stats are nice, 1200, 1400. Then we have the Ants Giving. Again, we only have 1 copy of this card, which I think we got from a campaign, and this is now available in the 2nd special pack, but again, we got unlucky with our pull, so we only have a single copy, but it's just a 1500 defender. Then we have the Atlas Combat Beetle, just 3 1500 vanillas, and then finally we're playing Ants Running About. This is just in here to increase the number of insects we have. Ideally, this would be another Ants Giving or another Gokibor, but we've decided to go with this just to increase the number of insects. So going on to the spells, the first one we have is Intruding Beetles. This is actually a pretty cool spell card. So if 2 or more face-up insect-type monsters are on the field, notably this says the field, not our field. So if we turn our opponent's monsters into insects using Biomech Mantis, we can then activate this card even though we only have 1 insect on the field. But we can send 1 card from our hand to the graveyard to draw 1 card. Okay, filtering is quite nice. Then we can destroy a spell trap on the opponent's fields. This is our back row hate that also has a bit of filtering, which is quite nice, especially considering we're playing one of these bricks that we don't really want to have in our hand. Then we have Pot of Avarice. Again, putting lots of cards back into our deck, really good, especially when we can just throw a load of insects in, which increases the chances that our Gyakutenno's effect does go off, and just getting a free plus is always really, really nice. Pot of Avarice is just an absolutely fantastic card. Being able to get a plus and being able to recycle, really, really strong. Then for our limit 1, we've gone with Insect Rampage. Now, this could just be Rice Terror Secure, which is a very strong trap card, especially in the current meta, but Insect Rampage is limit 1, and we wanted to play the Insect card. So we can shuffle 2 monsters from your graveyard into the deck. All face-up insects on your field gain 300 attack. If your opponent has a face-up insect monster on their field, you can also destroy 1 face-up level 8 or lower monster on their field. So notably, we don't have to destroy an insect on the field, they just have to have an insect in order for us to get to pop a level 8 or lower. Now, level 8 or lower sometimes can kind of suck, right? That means we're not going to be able to hit fusion monsters, but even in the current meta, this is still going to be really good against Psychics, because they're almost always going to have a level 7 out, whether that's Melody or whether that's Prima. Dark Galaxy is basically all level 8 and lower. Metarion is where this card's going to struggle the most, but it still can find some use. Basically, this card is okay. I think if this card was unlimited, this would see a ton of play, probably at 3 copies, but unfortunately, because it is limit 1, we do have to basically fight for either this or the Rice Terrace Crisis, which is a little bit awkward. Then for traps, we're playing Negate Attack, because this is just the best legend trap in the game, and then we have the Buffered Slime. Both of these traps are very, very important for surviving, and they're both very, very good against pretty much every deck, except Buffered Slime maybe not as useful against exactly Metarion, but other than that, it's good against all of the other top decks. So this is the deck. This is not super competitive, but it is competitive enough. Like we said, Ray did manage to get this to a top 8 finish, which congratulations to him. I personally have found this deck to be very funny to play. Sometimes you just pop off and you get to high roll your opponent, completely destroy their board, get a load of draws, filter through your hand very, very quickly, and it just feels like it's a very competitive, very competent deck. Then other times you'll feel like nothing has gone right at all, your hand is a complete mess, you've had to like tribute set 1, 2, or 3 times in a turn to get Megamies just out of your hand, and it can feel like we say, a bit of a bricky mess. But if you just, again, are looking for something that's semi-competitive, that is a bit of fun, I would recommend this deck. We did actually end up on a 7 win streak with this deck, somehow, but every time we won, it almost felt like we didn't deserve it, and every time we lost, it felt like we lost in such a comically over-the-top way that it was just kind of funny. So again, I really did enjoy playing this deck, so I guess we'll fire in some replays, and I can show you what I've been talking about.
ラッシュデュエル ラッシュデュエル ラッシュデュエル